Hello and welcome. So, today in this video I will go through this article, which is a very interesting and important article which shows the link between feminism, eugenics, and New Age cults, right? And what you're gonna hear in this article is really insane, right? Really unhinged stuff, which shows you the type of supremacist movement feminism always was at its core, right? Because the feminist movement was always linked with the eugenics movement, but also with female supremacy in a spiritual sense, right? It came out of the spiritualist New Age movement during the Victorian times, late Victorian era, and also correlated with the Theosophical Society, right? And they had a lot of links to racism and, like I said, eugenics and all of that, right? So let's just go through this article here. So the title is "The Future is Female Feminism, Spirituality, and Eugenics." Today we're going to look at the overlap between feminism, spirituality, and eugenics in the 1880s to 1940s. Why is there an overlap between feminism, spirituality, and eugenics? To break the question down, first of all, let's look at the overlap between first wave feminism and the occult revival of the late 19th century. 19th century New Age movements like spiritualism, theosophy, and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn were popular with feminists because these movements rejected the patriarchy of Christianity. Now, I have to interject here. There is no such thing as patriarchy of Christianity, right? Because patriarchy itself doesn't exist. It's an illusion, it's a lie. But sometimes you see certain tradcons thinking that there was a patriarchy, which is a cope, right? These tradcons are coping. And sometimes these movements worshipped a female deity like Isis or the Shekinah. They promoted gender equality. Now they promoted gender supremacy, female supremacy, right? Women enjoyed leadership positions in these movements. Indeed, they were often founded by women. Spiritualism was begun by the Fox sisters in 1848. The Theosophical Society was founded by Madame Blavatsky in 1875, and Christian Science was founded by Mary Baker Eddy in 1879. In addition, some people, both men and women, argued that women were essentially more spiritual than men, more intuitive, more attuned to the spirit world, right? So you have your first clue of the supremacist narrative, right? Women are these better beings, these more virtuous, more spiritual beings, right? And we see it today with claims like women are deeper in emotional terms and more empathetic and so on and so forth, and they're these guardians of nature, and we need female leaders to combat climate change, and they contrast that with the destructive nature of men and so on and so forth, right? Which is this inherent cultish ideology that international organizations like the UN and the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum espouse, right? Most spiritual mediums were women, for example. Professor Joy Dixon has chronicled how the membership of the Theosophical Society was dominated by women from 1895 to 1925. Secondly, one can see a lot of overlap between first-wave feminism and the eugenics movement. For example, the Eugenics Education Society was founded in 1907 by a 20-year-old widow, Sybil Gotto. Its administration was run by 6 women, and half of its membership were women. Wow. So this is really telling, right? The Eugenics Education Society was practically run by women, right? This is really crazy. Many leading first-wave feminists, Margaret Sanger, Marie Stopes, Annie Besant, Victoria Woodhull, the famous 5 of Canadian feminism, were also champions of eugenics. Why the overlap? First-wave feminists saw sex education and birth control as fundamental to the liberation of women from the burden of endless childbirth and enslavement to sexual demands and poor sexual hygiene of men. Now that's projection, right? Because it's men who are enslaved in the marriage, right? And I'm also gonna specifically focus on that in one of my next videos, right? Especially economically, men are the slaves in the marriage constellation. Sex education and birth control were good for women, feminists argued, but also good for the species. They would stop damaged and delinquent children from being born. So they already had this anti-children attitude. It shows that feminists are hostile to children, right? The suffragette movement arose in the late 19th century at the same time as the eugenics movement, when there was rising concern about the quantity and genetic quality of the human species in general and the white race in particular. So white supremacy and feminism going hand in hand. Eugenics gave a cosmic significance to women and motherhood. Women were depicted as mothers of the race by eugenic feminists. Women's choice of mate and skill in child-rearing were supposedly the deciding factor in the evolution of the species. The freer and more informed women's sexual choices were, the stronger the race would be. This is really, really racist stuff here, right? Early feminists were racists and white supremacists. This is very clear. Right. British feminist Stella Brown wrote in 1915, quote, absolute freedom of choice on the woman's part and intense desire both for her mate and her child are the magic forces that will vitalize and transfigure the race, end quote. Disgusting. Disgusting racism, man. And also linked with spirituality, racism and spirituality, pseudo-spirituality, these two things linked are a hallmark of fascism. These 3 late Victorian movements, feminism, spirituality, and eugenics, cross-fertilized in interesting and unusual ways. You find feminists arguing that it is women's cosmic destiny to guide evolution and aid humanity's ascent into gods. You also find the idea that evolution is culminating in the new woman or superwoman. We're going to examine the life and ideas of 6 superwomen, all of whom led unconventional lives and who developed their own fusion of feminism, spirituality, and eugenics. So you can already see the unhingedness of this of this movement, right? The early feminist movement was full of supremacist ideas and insane New Age ideas. And to all these red pill clowns, right, who say, oh, early, like only third wave modern feminism is bad, you have seen nothing yet. You have no idea what you're talking about. Old feminism was probably even more insane and worse and man-hating, right? So here's the first example, Victoria Woodhull. Victoria Woodhull's life is so extraordinary it sounds like fiction. Indeed, it's being turned into a film starring Brie Larson and a TV series starring Catherine Hagel. Victoria was born in 1838, the seventh of 10 children. She was a teenage spiritualist medium and clairvoyant who gave public seances and psychic readings. Wow. So basically a fraud. She claimed to be in touch with various spirits, including Demosthenes, Napoleon, and Josephine. Wow. At 15, she was married off to a drunken womanizer. They had a mentally disabled son, and Victoria blamed her marriage and herself for his disability. She left her husband and eventually became president of the American Association of Spiritualists and a leading figure in the American suffragette movement. She was perhaps the most popular speaker in the movement and an outspoken champion of free love, by which she meant a woman's right to choose who she has sex with, inside or outside the marriage. She declared, quote, "Yes, I'm a free lover. I have an inalienable constitutional and natural right to love whom I may, to love as long or as short a period as I can, to change that love every day if I please, and with that right neither you nor any law you can frame have any right to interfere," end quote. So basically she was arguing for the right to cheat in marriages, right? But also this free love is also suspicious to me in various ways, because as we saw in one of my videos where I basically exposed feminism and its link to pedophilia, right? This is sort of also an underlying ideology which is connected to that, right? With feminists, you have to be very suspicious, right? You have to be very suspicious. When they talk about free love, this could be a code word for something else. Any man who did not support the suffragette movement should, she said, be refused sex. Quote, "No more sexual intercourse for men who do not fully consent that all women shall be free, and who do not, besides this, also join the standard of the rebellion," end quote. Again, this is also more gaslighting and projection, because it's women were never oppressed, and as I've shown in my last video, it's actually men who were always oppressed. She was the first woman to run for president, which she did in 1872. She was also the first woman to give testimony to Congress, the first woman to start a Wall Street brokerage, and one of the first women to own and edit a newspaper. You have to also recognize that a lot of these feminist leaders, most of them, they were women from money. They were upper middle class women. They were not working class. They were really women that came from money most of the time, right? In her speeches, spiritualism, feminism, and eugenics fuse together in unusual ways. She warns that the world is increasingly filled with morons and delinquents, and she is at the cause is the rotten institution of marriage, which enslaves women to debauched men in loveless marriages. Again, more projection. It's actually men who are enslaved in loveless marriages. She knows from personal experience that such marriages create dysgenic children like her own son. Quote, "My boy, now 19 years of age, who should have been my pride and my joy, has never been blessed by the dawning of reason. I was married at 14, ignorant of everything that related to my maternal functions. For this ignorance, and because I knew no better than to surrender my maternal functions to a drunken man, I am cursed with this living death." End quote. Now look how she is calling her son living death. She hates her own son. This goes to show you feminists hate children, right? Woodhull argued for stirpiculture, a pre-Galtonian form of eugenics practiced in a mid-19th century spiritual commune called Oneida in upstate New York. Oneida was a polyamorous community where all reproduction had to be officially approved by the commune leader, who tried to match the fittest parents and produce the most physically and spiritually pure children. Woodhull called Oneida the greatest society on earth. Only partners who are in love and physically healthy should reproduce, she said. Quote, "One half of our sons, on reaching manhood, are unfit to become fathers, and that one half of our daughters, on reaching maturity, are unfit to become mothers. The marriages of such individuals produce epileptics, idiots, neurotics, insane inebriates, and by far the large number become criminals. We see thousands and thousands of parasites born every year who have no means of subsistence, who are destined to fasten upon their fellow creatures, draining the vitality and strength of the nation and precipitating its downfall." End quote. There you can not just only see the eugenics character of the thoughts of this woman, but also the bourgeois aspect, right, with the draining the strength of the nation, right? Basically, the working class, underclass, poor people was despised by these feminists, right? Introducing free love, sex education, and eugenics is, according to this feminist movement, a spiritual mission. And now, the insane part, right? It says here the spirits themselves call for it, Woodhull revealed. She had a trance-induced vision of the future after an apocalypse where many cities disappear under the sea, in which humans and spirits live together in perfect health and free love. Wow. So yeah, I told you it's gonna get insane, right? Now here's Madame Blavatsky. She founded the Theosophical movement, right? She was a Russian aristocrat, right? So again, another woman from wealth and power, essentially, right? And yeah, she was also into occultism, and she was supposedly initiated into a secret order of superhuman beings known as the Masters, right? This is what she claimed. Madame Blavatsky arrived in the United States at the high point of spiritualism's popularity, but she was dismissive of what she regarded as its amateur fumblings in the spirit world. The true adept like her was trained in the occult knowledge of the past, the secret doctrine found in all the great religious and magical traditions. In 1875, Blavatsky and her allies formed the Theosophical Society, announcing its three aims. First, to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Second, to encourage the study of comparative religion, philosophy, and science. Third, to investigate the unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in man. She and her colleagues then moved to India, establishing a headquarters in Aidar, and Blavatsky set to work condensing her occult knowledge into two enormous books, Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine. The Theosophical Society attracted thousands of members with churches all over the world. It proved particularly popular with middle-class women, some of them suffragettes. Right. Blavatsky was not an active suffragette, but she was aware of the popularity of theosophy with suffragettes and encouraged it. She was a feminist insofar as she challenged Victorian notions of the well-behaved domestic wife with her free thinking, her drinking and smoking, her rudeness and her rejection of domesticity. Now this domesticity, as I have shown in my last video, is a total lie. Women could work and they even could own businesses. While it prided itself on being progressive and cosmopolitan, the Theosophical Society was also quite hierarchical. It was guided by the Masters, an all-male elite of superhuman beings who only communicated through Madame Blavatsky. There was also an implicit racial hierarchy in Blavatsky's teachings. Now again with the racism, right? Even though one of the axioms or the aims was universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, right? Yet it's a contradiction because there was a racial hierarchy in Blavatsky's teachings, right? Her books blended together occult wisdom with scientific theories or pseudoscientific theories, and she created her own weird version of evolution. She claimed that humanity had evolved through various root races. 4 previous races had arisen and then been almost entirely wiped out, and now a 5th root race, the Indo-European Aryan race, was dominant. Now this is also very significant with the Aryan race idea, right? I think Tick had a video where he explained that this influenced some ideas of Himmler, right, and the Nazis, right? So these racist occult ideas, it probably influenced the Nazis from Blavatsky, right? There's a connection there. It would eventually be superseded by a new and more spiritual race, which would appear in California. Her spiritual evolution theory had a racist shadow side. Blavatsky suggested some ethnic groups were evolutionary throwbacks. She wrote, quote, "The sacred spark is missing in them, and it is they who are the only inferior races on the globe, now happily owing to the wise adjustment of nature, whichever works in that direction fast dying out." End quote. So she was clearly a racist, right? She declared that some races were inferior, right? And it also says here, her racial theories would be developed into virulently racist forms by later theosophists, particularly in Germany. Right, so again, you have to wonder, did these ideas influence the Nazis? Right? I'm pretty sure they have. Annie Besant, she was also a member of the Theosophical Society and a feminist, right? And also upper middle class English woman, right? She had a Tory husband, right? She believed in an occult hierarchy which guides and shapes evolution, led by the Hindu god Manu, who supposedly created the Indian caste system. According to Besant, the great work of the Manu is the building up of a race and its sub-races and families and nations, and he is at work now, end quote. Like Blavatsky, Besant believed in a racial hierarchy. She thought Chinese and Japanese people were part of the fourth root race, now superseded by the fifth root race of Indo-European Aryans, who would eventually rule the world in an expanded version of the British Empire. Wow, so not only racist, but also imperialist, right? She was then basically in support of the British Empire, right? So there you have it, right? Feminists, racists, imperialists, already in early feminism, right? With insane, racist, occult ideas, right? It was the cosmic mission of the Theosophical Society to support the evolution of this cosmic race. In the coming centuries, the new superhumans would draw together in Southern California under the banner of the Theosophical Society and form an elite caste, only breeding with each other. All marriages would be approved by Manu. Insane. Absolutely insane. Meanwhile, the failures of spiritual evolution would be swept away in wars and cataclysms. So again, with the eugenics, racist, pseudo-spirituality, this is all part of the cosmic plan. Besant walks through the slums of England and imagines a genocide clearing away the scum. She writes in Evolution of Life and Form, quote, sometimes I have felt, when in the pursuance of my duty I have gone with breaking heart through the slums of eastern and southern London, or through those of Glasgow or Edinburgh or Sheffield, as I have noted the types of men and women around me, as I have seen the human almost veiled by the brute, that nothing save the destruction of the forms could give any hope for those imprisoned with them, that for those men and women as they were, degraded, brutal, drunken, profligate, their very forms with the impress of the animal, the best mercy that God could show them would be an earthquake that would swallow the whole great city, end quote. So yeah, she was a genocidal, elitist, racist eugenicist, right? And this is we see a similar pattern with feminists today who write hashtag kill all men, right? Feminists today, like back in the day, see men in particular, but also people who are sort of poor and in the lower economic classes, they see them as subhuman, essentially, right? This is the racist, elitist, bourgeois thinking present in these types of movements, right? Now the fourth example, Florence Farr. Florence Farr was an actress, model, singer, and writer and occultist. So again, another feminist who comes from money, essentially, and status, right? All of these feminist leaders, or most of them, come from status, from bourgeois or rich status, right? And she was also a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. She wrote publications for the Theosophical Society. And of course, she was a member of the first feminist wave. And she declared this would be the woman's century. The woman's century, right? And she was also an anti-Semite. Now here's an anti-Semitic quote of her, which I will not read, right? Because YouTube might censor this video if I read that quote, but yeah. Florence Farr apparently was an anti-Semite, right? So feminists are also in bed with anti-Semites, right? She was also a eugenicist. Her father, William Farr, was a public health bureaucrat and early adopter of eugenics before Galton had even coined the term, and Florence developed her own occult eugenics, suggesting in an article in the New Age that humanity would only become perfect, quote, when a race of magicians hypnotize the innocent young into willing their own perfection, end quote. Again, insanity, total insanity. It seems to be a similar idea as one finds in theosophy. An occult elite acts as mediums for eugenic spirits who guide humanity's evolution into gods. Wow. Florence Farr, however, was not a mother and did not think woman's spiritual mission ended with motherhood. The ultimate aim of the adept is the perfection of themselves through the attainment of superwoman consciousness. Superwoman consciousness? What the fuck? Wow. Like I said, man, it's unhinged. It's unreal how unhinged the early feminist movement was, right? Full of weird occult ideas infused with female supremacy and eugenic racist bourgeois ideas, right? She wrote, quote, this state of consciousness, now identified by leading modern thinkers as the state called superhuman, is mystically feminine. It is Isis who will bring forth Horus, the savior, in later systems, the virgin of the world, the wisdom praised by the writer of Ecclesiastes. It has often been said jokingly that superhuman is woman, but it is only woman in her symbolic sense of wisdom as the field of the new birth we all await. End quote. She was not the only feminist to blend feminism with the Nietzschean cult of the Superman and to see the new woman as the aim end goal of evolution. A feminist journal called the London Free Woman also called for the rise of a new aristocracy of superwomen. There you go, right? There's more evidence that feminists were also for supremacy. They were never for equality, right? Again, a feminist journal called the London Free Woman also called for the rise of a new aristocracy of superwomen. Superwomen, aristocracy. This is supremacist ideology, female supremacist ideology. As one Free Woman contributor put it, the woman was destined to realize in herself the highest and best of which humanity is capable, to become in the dim distance of time a being higher in type than man and further removed. End quote. Wow. This, again, it's no surprise that we see female supremacy today when this was always the core of the feminist movement, right? It was always in the roots of the feminist movement. Now another example, Frances Sweeney. Of all the quote-unquote superwomen this article described, Sweeney had the most conventional life and the most unconventional views. Despite her establishment background, she was a fierce suffragette feminist. Now, it actually shouldn't say despite, right? Because the feminist suffragette leaders, most of them were from establishment background, right? She declared, quote, "The woman's era is dawning. The flow of the human tide has set in towards fairer shores and bears triumphantly on its crest the womanhood of the world." End quote. She was also a member of the Malthusian League and the Eugenics Education Society, and she was a theosophist and occultist. She brought these spiritual feminist eugenics interests together in the League of Isis, an organization she launched to promote sex education for mothers and veneration of the Divine Mother. Divine Mother. Again, another pseudo-spiritual female supremacist cult ideal. Sweeney was a female supremacist and gynocrat, i.e. she advocated rule by women. There you go. Early feminists, female supremacists. There you go. She thought women are the superior gender in just about every sense. She wrote in The Awakening of Women, quote, "The female organization is the one of which nature has bestowed most care, provision and attention, and has been, so to speak, her first and her last love," end quote. So, again, it is very clear that early feminists were female supremacists. Very clear. According to these female supremacists, men, meanwhile, are an excrescences, a superfluidity, a waste, more prone to idiocy and insanity, more aggressive and warlike, more primitive. So you can see similar man-hating misandrist ideas also in the manifesto of Valerie Solanas, right? So the early feminists described men as evil and degenerate, essentially. It's man-hating eugenicists, right? And these early feminists racist eugenicists even said that men are responsible for racial and species degeneration. Okay, I mean, you can clearly see a lineage from early feminism to today's man-hating policies. You can clearly see the lineage, right? Sweeney is a devotee of spiritual evolution. Nature is the divine mother. She is Isis, Ishtar, Demeter, Sophia. The male god of the Old Testament is a phony, a world fabricator. Advanced souls are now waking up to the divine feminine. This worship of a female deity can be found in other feminists of the era, by the way. The American suffragettes Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Matilda Joshua Gage launched their own women's Bible and sometimes started meetings with a prayer to a female deity. So if you think that suffragism was this progressive, secular movement, humanist movement, no, it was a racist, eugenicist, and even cult-like movement, right? It was not secular, it was not humanistic, it was not progressive, and it was against equality. Okay, it was supremacist. For Sweeney, the goddess of natural evolution works through women's sexual choice. The freer they are in the choice, the higher the species will rise. Science should also guide reproduction. All parents should get approval from a physician before they reproduce. So another link to eugenics. Gradually, the ultimate aim and purpose of the goddess evolution is becoming clear. The perfection of woman and the disappearance of man. So there you go, right? And you have early feminists also saying that the male population should be reduced to 10% or something. This is what early feminists have said. The woman of the future will reproduce through parthenogenesis, the spontaneous development of an embryo from an unfertilized egg, and men will no longer be necessary. Men are, in fact, becoming increasingly feminized and will gradually turn into women. This idea of a female-only dystopia appears in some novels of the era, such as Herland, a 1915 novel by the American spiritual feminist eugenicist Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It also appears in Wonder Woman, right? Now, and here's this, many people actually don't know the female supremacist origins of Wonder Woman, right? And Wonder Woman was inspired by Margaret Sanger, the feminist birth control activist and eugenicist, right? So yeah. In this chapter, we explored the overlap between feminism, spirituality, and eugenics. We've seen how feminist eugenicists celebrated women's central role in spiritual evolution, either as mothers of the race or as high priestesses channeling the evolutionary instructions of the spirit world, or as the superwomen of a gynocratic future. These ideas are still with us today. We see scientists declaring that women are evolutionary superior to men, naturally smarter and healthier, and this explains their longer lives and better performance at schools and universities. The future, we are told, is female. Yeah, and again, I want to highlight something, right? This female supremacist narrative, right? This is why I made this video. against Richard Reeves, right, debunking his nonsense, because he himself was espousing some female supremacist narrative that girls do better at schools because they're naturally superior. This is the type of supremacist bullshit we have to push back against. Yeah. And again, the Theosophical Society also had great influence, actually, right? Not just in terms of spiritual community and New Age, but they were even they supported the United Nations, right? This is from Theosophy Wiki, right? Theosophists have been supportive of the United Nations since its inceptions, right? And here's, for example, members of the Theosophical Society at the United Nations Conference for Intergovernmental Groups, right? And again, here's also an article on Margaret Sanger. She was, her activism essentially led to Planned Parenthood, right? And she was a racist eugenicist and a feminist, right? Again, feminism also was involved in the KKK, right? Feminism is the gender KKK. Here's also a great article by Professor Tommy J. Curry, Feminism as Racist Backlash, how racism drove the development of the 19th and 20th century feminist theory, right? And feminists, suffragettes were in the British Union of Fascism, right? So I will link you these articles in the description. You can read them yourself, right? But yeah, it goes to show that feminism at its core, at the beginning, until now, was always a female supremacist movement and was always full of insane man-hating ideas that was even infused with cult-like spiritual supremacy and female worship, right? So yeah, this was essentially my video on that. And now I also want to give a shout out to this channel here, hashtag Feminism is the gender KKK. You should subscribe to this channel, because at this time only 6 people have subscribed to this channel, right? So yeah, subscribe to the channel Feminism is the gender KKK. I will link it in the description of this video. And also spread the hashtag Feminism is the gender KKK. Spread it on Twitter, spread it on YouTube, spread it on Reddit, spread it everywhere. This hashtag is important, okay? Because feminism is the gender KKK, literally. Thanks for watching.